right. Hey, wonderful. Hey, everybody. We are live. Welcome back. I am Gina from Advantage College Planning, and I'm really excited because one of my colleagues is joining me tonight. So we have a great evening set up for us. We are going to be talking about course planning and trying to figure out, what classes students should be taking as they're getting ready to register for classes. So course registration is going to be our topic this evening. We are going to be going through kind of a basic high-level overview. So then this way we'll have a lot of time at the end of our content just to open it up for questions, because I know that when it comes to course registration, there usually are a lot of questions because it's a really specific individual journey for each student. So we'll definitely have time for those as we move along. And so as you're coming in, it's really great to see the numbers growing. Awesome. Welcome if you are new here, or welcome back if you've joined us before. So as you're coming and getting settled in with us this evening, if you want to go ahead and just let us know in the chat, make sure our sound is working, make sure you can see us, and let us know where you're tuning in from. Advantage College Planning, we have our two main offices here in the Raleigh Triangle area, and that's where Lindsay and I are based. But we do work with students all over the country, so it'd be great to know where you're tuning in from, and then also to know what year your student is, especially because we'll be talking about course registration, and the content really will be applicable to any student who's registering for high school classes next year. So that goes from current 8th graders all the way up to our current juniors. So great. Oh, we've got someone has a freshman. That's awesome. Wonderful. Junior and freshman. Great. Both ends of the spectrum. Wonderful. All right. Well, yeah, so there will be time to ask questions as we go along. So you can feel free to put your questions in the chat and then we will work through them. But let's go ahead and get started. So first, I just wanted to start off by welcoming Lindsay. So Lindsay Ringenbach is our Chief Operating Officer at Advantage College Planning, and she is also one of our college consultants. And so, yay, welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, great to be here. I'm really excited.
So fun to have you here. So Lindsay and I are right now working with all of our students on course planning. This is the time of year that students are really in the kind of knee deep in that. So we just wanted to hop on tonight and share some tips and answer some questions for anyone who might have some questions about that process. So let's just go ahead and jump right in with what are the options? So as students and families are getting ready to do this course registration, first, it might be a little different than it was when parents were in school. So there's a lot of options now. So do you want to talk us through, Lindsay, what are the options of level of courses that students have to choose from?
Yeah, there really are so many. The first level would be just your academic high school course, which is a perfect level for so many students, just that general academic level. And then moving a little bit through rigor, we would go into an honors course, and that may be offered in different disciplines. I even have seen some high schools now offer an honors level of health and PE, which I think just involves one more additional paper or project that a student has to take. But when we're talking about level of rigor, we include even the disciplines like health and wellness. And then we can move in rigor into an AP course, an advanced placement course, an international baccalaureate class. And then, of course, there are some opportunities for students to take college level courses. And then kind of along the way, there are also some opportunities for dual enrollment options too. So working within the context of your student's high school, you should have a stronger understanding of what course level options there are available to your student.
Awesome. So once a family knows what the options are at their specific high school, which you can find by either going to that presentation night that a lot of schools do when it gets time for course registration, or going on the school's website and looking at their course registration information that's usually found under the student services page. Now we know what our options are, but how do students really know what they should take? How do you guide your students when you're trying to figure out what levels they should take of each class?
First and foremost, I think teacher recommendations are the best source of recommendation for the level that's appropriate for the student. I think outside of a teacher recommendation, talking with your student about what curriculum they are most excited about and interested in, and that may differ per discipline. So your student might be ready to take the next level of math, but maybe not ready to take the next level of science. So I think understanding first and foremost what your student is most excited about, the teacher recommendation, and then moving into an appropriate level for each individual class.
Yeah. And then what about thinking, do you think about what the student might want to study? Like, how does that come into play if they're thinking already about a major?
Yeah, and I think, Gina, you and I were talking about this last week about how colleges are more focused on learning more about a student's interest. And I think that may reveal from a student's transcript might be what they want to study in college. So yeah, I agree. I mean, what are some of your thoughts about that and thinking about the student's choice of major and the courses that they like to take?
Yeah. So it's definitely a conversation I like to have with my students early on, especially, and even if they don't really know what they want to major in, that's fine, right? But then I start looking at, well, what classes do you like? What are you most strong in? But usually as they start getting further into high school, students will start saying, oh, I have an interest in majoring in business, or I have an interest in majoring in a pre-vet path or something along those lines. And so then we know, okay, if someone's interested in a STEM field, then their future is going to hold a lot of math and science classes at the college level.
Yeah.
So that gives us an opportunity to have that discussion of, well, how do you feel about your math and science classes? How are you performing in those? And if that's an area of strength, then we should be pushing your rigor there. And if those are classes that you typically really struggle in, those are not your strongest classes, it doesn't mean you can't become a vet, but it just means we need to have a bigger conversation about that so that we can be really intentional, both about your courses that you're choosing now, but also the path that's going to be a good fit for you as you move through your studies.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, I think that's exactly the conversation that I would have too with a student. And in fact, just last week, I was talking with a student who was debating between AP Bio and AP Physics. And she was leaning more towards the medical field rather than the engineering field. And so we kind of thought about the course description of AP Bio versus the course description of AP Physics, and she was more excited about what she would be learning in AP Bio for perhaps applying that to her future collegiate or even post, baccalaureate programs. So yeah, I think you're exactly right to think about these things.
Yeah, it's never too early to start just being intentional. I use that word a lot. Just let's be intentional.
Yeah.
So then how do you advise a student who maybe took a class freshman year, sophomore year, got a C in that class, or maybe they've always been a straight A student and now they got a B, right? Is there any coming back from that, right? How do what's kind of the next step? Or is that just, well, now all is lost?
Yeah, right. I think it's okay for students to demonstrate growth. And yeah, it's definitely okay for a student to understand that they should bounce back. I think that when a student is consistently earning C's across several disciplines, then that might be an indicator that they're taking on too much too soon, and that perhaps a step backwards to get their confidence again in the classroom so that they can return to perhaps their previous, in middle school where they easily earned A's and B's, and then in high school, all of a sudden they were consistently earning C's. I can see students struggle with that and that lack of confidence. So taking a step back curricularly often makes sense for those students. But then on the flip side, I had a student who didn't want to he was taking AP English as a junior, but didn't want to take AP English as a senior, but had consistently earned A's every single year in English, but didn't want to take that next level. That to me was more of a red flag than a student who, struggled a little bit, got their feet under them, and then jumped back in, because it just indicated like, nah, I'm just not really feeling it senior year and I want to take a step back. And I was like, that's a real red flag. When you're earning A's in that class, you should be continuing to push yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I also love the flip side of you were talking about, where sometimes that transition from middle school to high school can be a little bumpy. I've noticed with some of my students that it's not about their cognitive ability. It's for some students, it has nothing to do with their ability to comprehend the information and share that back on an exam. It's about all those other soft study skills and time management skills that maybe in middle school they just didn't ever really need to develop because
they
didn't need it, right? Like they go to class, they get the information, they retain it, they take the test, they get an A. But then they get to high school and the stakes are a little bit higher. And sometimes taking a step off of that rigor gives them a chance to develop those strategies and those skills to then move forward and be successful.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So then for those students, and I think this attaches then to both, right? So we talk a lot about an upward trend in our world. So if you know anyone who works in higher ed or higher ed adjacent, you probably hear people talking about an upward trend. And that is something that relates both to both ends of the spectrum of what Lindsay was talking about. So students coming in from middle school struggling and going up, or a student who's been steadily going up and then decides to maybe take a reduction in rigor. So how do you explain upward trend when you're talking to your students?
Yeah, I think that each year a student's curriculum should get progressively more challenging. So that's the ideal, right? So that maybe in ninth grade, we don't start so strong that there's no room to grow, because we want each year of high school to be a little bit more challenging, because that's just developmentally appropriate. I think the biggest thing that I hear from students, and the biggest mistake that I see from students, is that they take on too much as a junior and then burn out and don't want to take the harder classes as a senior. And what I tell students is that colleges do a lot of research on their incoming freshmen. They study those freshmen to the nth degree, so that they can learn about what makes their freshmen successful. And a study revealed that the successful freshman year was a result of a strong senior year in high school. So it's not just about getting into that college, right? We want students to be in the right fit academically, but it's also about thriving in that academic fit. And in order for a student to really thrive, they have to perform throughout high school all the way to the very end. It's like running a race and then stopping before the finish line. And it's like, well, then you're not going to be as prepared for the next level, than that next set of academic challenges. So it's it's probably where I see students fight me the most. It's like, really, Lindsay, really, I have to take all these hard classes senior year? And I tell them yes, because that just will help them be a stronger freshman in college. And that's exactly what we want. We want them to perform well when they get to that next level.
Yeah, I get that too. And I also get, really, Gina, I can't have a free fourth period. Or I can't have a late start. I have my graduation requirements. All I need is one English and I'm done. Do I really have to go in for the full day? Yes, because of the upward trend.
Yeah.
But for students who want a little bit of flexibility, but still want to keep that rigor, one option for some students is the opportunity to take a dual enrollment class. So dual enrollment, taking those classes either at the community college or some of the local four-year colleges might have a program with the high school where students can take a class and get both high school and college credit. And that can strengthen a transcript because it's increased level of rigor, while also giving the student sometimes some flexibility, because sometimes those classes are online. How do you advise your students, though, if they're trying to decide between taking AP classes or dual enrollment, if both are offered at their school?
Yeah, I think that this is probably one of the most difficult choices for students, because we're seeing so many mixed messages from the college perspective. I think in general, the AP curriculum is so standardized that it's really easy for a college to evaluate a student's performance in an AP course in North Carolina, because that's the same AP class that's going to be offered in California. Whereas a dual enrollment class in one area could be really different than a dual enrollment class in the other. And when we're trying to prepare students to compete, especially I think in terms of really selective college admissions, I'm still encouraging students to choose their, this is a very individual choice, but oftentimes the AP curriculum is the better choice, but not always. Especially because there are some really great reasons to choose dual enrollment. As you mentioned before, getting that college experience, it's offered online. And then oftentimes students have maxed out their options in high school. And so the dual enrollment program could be a really great way for them to find some curricular challenges and also some enjoyment outside of what's just offered in the high school. But I think that's a really individual decision, and not something that can be like painted with a broad stroke of this is always better than this. It's really what's better for each individual student.
Yep, I totally agree. So yeah, I mean, in general, they're both seen as a high level of rigor. Both often are weighted similarly at high schools. I know here at our local public schools, they're weighted. AP and dual enrollment are weighted the same in terms of the GPA and class rank. But yeah, it really does depend on the specific student and what their goals are. Totally agree. So then what I think before we get into the Q&A, I think it's important to give just a general bottom line review about, is there a magic number? How many AP classes are enough? That is why people logged in to see this. They want a number. How many? So is there a magic number?
Right. I have kind of a long-winded response to that, so bear with me, everybody. So I think that there's not a magic number for each individual student. So the general answer is no, there's just not a magic number. For some students, it's really appropriate for them to take on a lot of AP classes or fully enroll in the IB program. For other students, that's just not appropriate for them. However, I will say that, again, colleges love to study their students. And another study that was published indicated that there is kind of a number of classes of rigor, of strength within the AP program that does yield stronger results in college. And we see that number between 5 and 7, right? But that's not, the threshold. That's not I have to have 5, and once I get 5, then I'm done. I have to have more than 7. So it is really an individual choice. There's not a right or wrong with that. But I would say that, I love that colleges do research on their students. And that is one of the research studies that came out. And I think that does indicate, though, that the student is ready for challenge, right? If a student is taking between 5 and 7 AP classes, that's a student who's really pushing themselves. And I think that's great. But again, that's not going to be like, okay, well now, Mom, I have to take 7 APs because Lindsay told me I have to take 7 APs.
Or Lindsay said I only need 5, so I'm done.
Right.
Also that.
So there's definitely not the right or wrong, but yeah.
Right. Perfect. Great. So now, like I said, we really just want to open it up to questions and answers. So we know that because this is such an individualized process, you may have questions about your specific students, and we will do our best to advise you or kind of answer any general questions that you have. So as you are typing up those questions, I will let you know that I will be back here at the end of the month on March 26th at 8 o'clock. And I will be talking about what college admissions officers are looking for in a student's resume or activity list. So that will be coming up at the end of the month so that you can start thinking about your summer plans and what your student will be doing in the summer. So that's very exciting. But in general, Q&A time. Okay, so first question, is there a preference between AP or IB, and which are better between that program?
Yeah, it depends on the school. Some high schools only allow students to take IB courses if they're fully enrolled in the full IB program. And that means that they're taking IB coursework across disciplines, including additional classes like theory of knowledge and doing extended essays. So but a student can also have a full curriculum of AP courses. So there's really not a preference for either or both. So I would say that's within each student's high school offerings, and just to work with your own student school to make those choices.
Yeah, I have a student. There's one of the schools we have has a great mix of both at the school. And so I have some students that have done full IB, but I also have some students that have kind of been selective again and really intentional and said, I want to take the IB version of this, but I want to do the AP version of that. And their school allows that. So again, being intentional. Okay, is there any specific guidance for a future computer science major?
Math.
Lots of math.
Take a lot of math. So I would say that students should really be focusing on the math curriculum. And then there are 2 AP computer science courses, and some high schools offer both. So I would say if your student's high school offers both AP computer science courses, to take both of those, and then just to really load up on the math curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching from math to foreign language, opposite end of the kind of brain skills there. Do you have recommendations for when in their high school career a student should take their foreign language requirement if they're only planning to take the 2 that are required by their high school?
Yeah. Ideally, foreign language should be taken. I think, and I'm going to push back on that if they're only planning to take two, and really push hard to see if they could take the third level of a foreign language. So for most students, I would say taking foreign language as early as 9th or 10th grade is really ideal. You know, that Gina and I both live in North Carolina, and the state of North Carolina, for our UNC system schools, requires 2 levels of the same foreign language, 2 units. But other states require more, including 3 to 4. So I would encourage students to start their foreign language curriculum as early as 9th and 10th grade.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other thing too is if they can do it 9th and 10th grade, then that frees them up. If
Yeah.
they're just seeing it as maybe the student has a language-based learning difference, or maybe
Yeah.
there's, there's a reason why the foreign language is only going to be 2 years. I would
Right.
say try to knock it out as early as you can. So
Yeah.
then when you get to 11th and 12th grade, those requirements are done and your student will have a little bit more wiggle room in what they can pick and choose of the classes they actually want to take that oftentimes aren't available until you get to 11th or 12th.
Yep.
And then you won't be hampered by those requirements. APIB, okay. So does the UC CSU recognize any honors classes offered by schools? And if so, are honors and APIB weighted the same by the UC CSUs?
Yeah, they definitely recognize honors classes, and they are not weighted the same as AP IB classes. So AP and IB are weighted more strongly than honors classes.
Yep. Is 4 AP classes too many junior year from an upward trends perspective?
I would say that plan out the senior year schedule at the same time that you're planning out the junior year schedule, and that way you'll know if 4 is too many. Like, do we want to save one of those for senior year, or do I also have 4 that I would take in the senior year as well as the 4 that I'm taking in the junior year? If your student is ready for those 4 in the junior year and has a plan for 4 in the senior year, then I think that's great. Perfect.
Yep. Will more AP courses increase acceptance to schools with a low acceptance rate? So we're going to talk about those highly selectives.
Yeah, I would say when we're thinking about colleges that are, I love that term too, highly rejective.
I know. I almost said that. I was like, I'll be nice, highly selective.
Yeah. So those schools that are only offering admission to, I think anything below 18%. And there are so many schools that offer, only offer admission to less than 10%. Students have to be taking the most rigorous curriculum available to them. So yeah, there's just no other way to do that.
Yep. Wilmore. Okay. How much do 12th grade AP classes influence admissions officers, given that their grades will not be factored in? And so I think this is a great question.
Yeah.
And this is a question I know I get a lot from my students. You probably get them too. Like, yeah, but this goes back to the upward trend. So how does that play out, Lindsay?
Yeah. And I often tell this to students too, when I encourage them to make their senior year their strongest year academically in terms of rigor of curriculum, I also tell them that it's okay if their grades aren't as strong as they were perhaps in the past, if they're taking harder classes. When a student applies to college, the college will see their full senior schedule. And this is not only if it's not on the transcript, because I've seen that before, where a student's transcript, I would say most students' transcripts include all classes for senior year, but occasionally it doesn't. But when a student applies to college, the college application itself asks the students to list their senior year classes. And so that's hugely influential. So a college admissions office is going to really study strongly the student's senior schedule. And that's incredibly influential. And then students have to follow through on that schedule. Oftentimes I'll see students say that, well, I'm going to put down, that spring semester of senior year, I'm going to take AP Calc BC, but I'm going to actually drop that class. No. The student would then have to email the admissions office. The admissions office would then have to re-review the student's application in light of the schedule change. So they need to follow through the courses that they plan to take.
Yep. And also, if a student does apply early, but then gets deferred to a later admissions plan, then the grades also will be sent for those first semester classes. So it is really important. Okay, what do you think of using the 2 AP computer science classes for fulfilling the world language sequence if a student is going into computer science in college?
I think that's kind of tricky, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that not all colleges would use that, to be honest. So I think if a college has a minimum course requirement of world language, I think that the student needs to take an actual foreign language. Because I have sometimes even seen like a American Sign Language not be considered a foreign language.
Same.
So I think it's a really risky plan to use the computer science classes as world language.
Yeah, I also think that, again, if you're thinking about the broad context of the application pool that your student is being considered in, and your student is exceptional and wonderful and amazing, but there are thousands of other exceptional, wonderful, amazing students who have the foreign language requirement, that's immediately putting your student at a disadvantage. And we don't ever want to advise a student to go into a situation where they're already now behind.
Great.
If a student changes high schools, how would he adjust the rigor to maintain the upward trend? So, for example, going from a school that offered no AP classes freshman year to going to a school where the APs were offered freshman year.
Colleges see this all the time. So there's all kinds of life experiences that a student is going to bring into the application process. So it's just work with your student's school to make the best choices for your student, knowing that that rigor can come outside of the school. I've had students that have had a life change as a family that has forced them to change schools as late as second semester junior year, and that student wasn't offered a full AP curriculum that they wanted to take, and so that student did a personal project because they were really curious about chemistry and wanted to learn more on their own, and then could write about that in the college application process. So there's ways to explain that. So I would say just do your best to work within the system of the school.
Yeah, and not worry about what you might have missed out on and feel like you're catching up.
Right.
Like, just don't get caught up. If that should be our bottom line. Don't get caught up in the rat race and feel like you're missing out. It's fine. Like, every student has their own individual journey, and yeah, focusing on what's best for your student will always be the best path. How early should students start working with you? Oh, Allison, great question. How early should students start working with you so they start picking the right classes for college? So can freshman classes impact college acceptance?
Big time. Yeah, we start working with students as early as 8th grade. So yeah, absolutely. Because we know that course selection is one of the biggest factors in the admissions process, it's really important to make a 4-year plan. Freshman classes can certainly impact college acceptances. So it's never too early. 8th grade, 9th grade, perfect time to start with us.
And that's why when we start working, no matter when we start working with students, we create a 4-year plan so that we can start mapping out. And so we go and we look at the college, or we look at the high school's course offerings, and then we can start to map out, okay, you're in freshman year, this is what you're taking now. Here's what sophomore year, junior year, and senior year may look like. Obviously, everything can change, but just let's start kind of playing around with that and get an idea so that, again, we can make those intentional choices at each step. Oh, is junior year too late to work with us? No. Great question. But no, it is not. Junior year is a great time to get started with us because you haven't missed anything. It's about, again, your students' own individual timing and journey. And starting with us junior year is a great time because we still have time to talk about those 12th grade classes at this point, right? And then we also have a lot of other things that we would be working on. So, for example, what I'm talking about at the end of the month is the activity list and the resume planning. We still have more of this semester ahead of us, plus a whole summer. And then the college application process will be starting next summer as well. So there's still a lot of work that we would love to work with your junior on if they have questions or would like a little bit of guidance through this process. Absolutely. Can you go back and pick up the question about, is it okay to take on an elective such as team sports, or is that a waste of a class? Oh, sorry, Laura, if I missed that. Okay, so is it okay to take on an elective such as team sports, or is that a waste?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that as long as the rest of the curriculum is strong, I think elective courses should be what students want to take. And I have so many athletes or so many athletic students that, love to have the opportunity to be athletic during the school day. So that's perfect. Yep, it's definitely not a waste of a class.
Yeah. I think sometimes there are students too who they need that movement in the day, right, to be successful in their other classes, or they kind of just need that space, even especially if they're taking a heavy load, for them, like a rigorous academic load, they need that one period to look forward to where they're like, okay, I don't need to be on. Yeah, there is no waste. Nope. If it's intentional, then that's the most important thing.
Awesome. Well, this was so much fun, Gina.
I know, this was really great. Thanks so much for joining me. This is really helpful. So I will be back here at the end of March to talk about planning out, creating a resume, and really being intentional about what colleges are looking for on your student's resume. If you found this to be helpful, you definitely can find other videos like this. Other Facebook Lives are on our Facebook page. They are all recorded and there for you to watch. You also could go to our website, advcp.com. You'll find short videos from me, a blog from my colleague Jamie, and a podcast from my colleague Ariel. And you also could submit a consultation form if you do have a junior or a freshman and would like some guidance with the process. So thanks again so much. And we're really excited to see you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.